No, and everybody. So welcome to the 22nd Annual Outstanding Citizens Award Ceremony. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Anne Marie Schubert. I'm the district attorney here in Sacramento. I'm very fortunate to have this job. So every year our office holds this ceremony, Outstanding Citizens Award, in conjunction with National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And National Crime Victims' Rights Week was started 40 years ago by President Reagan. And it's a time that we come in this country together to recognize that the challenges that victims undertake when they have to step up in the criminal justice system. It's a time to recognize what they do and the steps that they take in this effort to seek justice. When National Crime Victims' Rights Week was started 40 years ago, our president said, "For too long, the victims of crime have been forgotten persons of our criminal justice system. Rarely do we give victims the help that they need or the attention that they deserve. Yet the protection of our citizens, to guard them from becoming victims, is the primary purpose of our penal laws. Thus, each new victim personally represents an instance in which our system has failed to prevent crime. Lack of concern for victims compounds that failure." This year's theme of National Crime Victims' Rights Week is very fitting. Support victims, build trust, engage communities. This theme describes the contributions of many of the individuals that we're going to recognize today. Support victims, build trust, engage communities. This theme is also representative of this year's goal of our office, which we started this year, which is the 2021 Year of the Victims campaign that we announced earlier this year, which is designed to support victims of crime to ensure that they are not forgotten in our criminal justice system, that they are not forgotten by our legislators, our public officials, the media, and the community at large. This campaign, the 2021 Year of the Victim, includes what we call the Voices for Victims Coalition, which is made up of members of our community who are committed to achieving justice not just for themselves or a loved one, but it also includes community leaders who have advocated on behalf of crime victims and have sought to help the enhancement of public safety. Our Victims Coalition mission is to ensure that the pursuit of criminal justice reform, that the survivors and the victims of crime are not forgotten, and that their voices are heard and that they're heard loudly. Today, we will be honoring coalition members, including Paduacee Vue, and Mervyn Brookins, who you'll see this afternoon, and others who are joining us virtually. I want to thank all of them for their dedication to this coalition. To help everybody keep everyone safe, obviously we're still living in a virtual world. We have to be socially distanced. We obviously have to follow protocols. So we are holding today's ceremony, similar to last year, in two different segments so that we can have all the health protocols followed. There will be 4 presentations this morning. Then we're going to take a break. We're obviously going to do everything to make sure we're following those protocols. And this afternoon, we're going to close with 2 presentations beginning at 1:30. We're also going to live stream this morning and this afternoon ceremony, so family, friends, colleagues, law enforcement, anyone in the criminal justice system that has a role can be here, whether it's in person or virtually, so that we can celebrate the recipients of today. During today's ceremony, you're going to see here on the screen what we've done for many, many years is we display our memory quilts. They were made by our Homicide Support Network and reflect the faces of the loved ones who have been lost to homicide in our community. These quilts are a reminder of the lives that have been taken by violence in our community and the painful impact of those who have to survive them. This morning, we will start with our Outstanding Citizens Award presentation. And as usual, those awardees are nominated by deputy district attorneys, by victim advocates, as well as by investigators. They're nominated because they have demonstrated, these victims and witnesses, extraordinary courage in difficult circumstances in order to testify and participate in the criminal justice system. Or they're recognized because they have gone above and beyond to protect a victim or to help a victim that is in need. So this morning, the first person that we're going to ask to come up and do their presentation is Principal Criminal Attorney Allison Dunham. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Allison Dunham, and I'm a supervising prosecutor at the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. I'm assigned to the Major Crimes Unit, and I prosecute cases of domestic violence homicide. Today, I'm honored to introduce to you three extraordinary women, Nia Vang and her daughters, Paduacee and Vang Vue. Nia Vang is Paduacee Vue's mother, and Paduacee and Vang Vue were Paduacee's sisters. I am so incredibly proud to recognize these three women for their courage in refusing to accept a law enforcement's opinion that Paduacee Vue died from an accident or worse, by suicide. I also admire the love they had for Paduacee Vue in pursuing justice, not only for her, but for her daughter Sophia, who will never know her mother the way she should have. On February 3rd of 2017, Paduacee Vue was killed when she fled a vehicle after being kidnapped by her husband, Jerry Vang. At the time of her death, Paduacee Vue was just 29 years old, a graduate from UC Davis, and had just begun a master's program at Sacramento State University. When law enforcement initially investigated Paduacee Vue's death, Jerry Vang reported that they had gotten to an argument and she jumped out of the truck. When law enforcement asked Jerry Vang if he had a history of domestic violence, he lied and said no. Unfortunately, that lie was believed. Had his record been run, law enforcement would have discovered that not only did Jerry Vang have a history of domestic violence, it was prolific. Nia Vang, Paduacee Vue, and Vang Vue were unsatisfied with the investigation because they knew Paduacee Vue loved her daughter Sophia and her family and would never have jumped from the truck unless she believed she had no choice. A Hmong community representative contacted Sacramento County District Attorney Anne-Marie Schubert and asked the District Attorney's Office to take a second look at this case. Well, to make a long story short, we certainly did. Lieutenant Kirk Campbell from the District Attorney's Office was assigned to investigate Paduacee Vue's death. He's here today, and he, along with his homicide investigative team, found evidence that Paduacee Vue was kidnapped and uncovered all of Jerry Vang's past domestic violence, and even found he had a new victim of domestic violence after Paduacee Vue's death. Lieutenant Campbell worked side by side with Nia Vang, Paduacee Vue, and Vang Vue as they gathered all of Paduacee Vue's text messages and Facebook instant messages describing the past violence she suffered at Jerry Vang's hands. This evidence was critical in securing a guilty verdict on all counts, and Jerry Vang is now serving life without the possibility of parole. Anne-Marie, I am honored to present to you Nia Vang, Paduacee Vue, and Vang Vue for this year's Outstanding Citizen Award. Yes, you may want to say something.
Cô thọ ở trong nên chờ bố lô sẽ hỏi rong trâu cụ đặc tàu ở trong thì What cho kế chân chân trâu của tuần xài cho kế tua.
I would like to thank everyone for giving the opportunity to be here and for getting justice for my daughter.
Thọ bí sư của tư xã hạt địa của chế nâng trâu chú trò họ á lời. Địa sĩ vì what cho kế chân chân nhớ trò họ luôn trong nọ của theo lính thiệt tàu của tuần xài cho kế tua. Trâu cho kế chân chân.
From the beginning, my family, we didn't feel like there would be any justice, but because of the city and the work that you guys have done, I felt like justice was served.
Trở giao của tuần xài tôi là lo. Đi từ ba tàu này cho kế tua. Một trò cho kế chân chân trò của chế nên là của thọ quá trâu.
Even though my daughter may have passed, the district attorney's office have given her, her justice, and I would like to thank everyone here.
Cô sa hại trâu. Thì nâng họ luôn đĩa tế nào hạt tìa. Do nên lên tư trâu chú trâu họ á lọ cho chê. Thế nên họ chứ chứng một trâu nọ chứ. Là do bà tàu này ý giả lý là bà cũ.
I want to let everyone know that even though you may feel like there's no justice or you haven't been given the right, just tell the truth and just tell the truth and justice will serve you.
Một chân đó.
Thank you.
I think we're taking a picture. Should we? All right.
All right, at this time, I'd like to introduce Deputy District Attorney Kristen Anderson for our next recipient.
Guys can stand right here. Mr. Halloway, please, here. Deputy. Good morning. My name is Kristen Anderson, and I currently work in the homicide unit at the District Attorney's Office. Fortunately for Deputy Ladwig, who is here today, this case did not turn into a homicide. And that was due to the efforts and the behavior of our outstanding citizen that's here today, Herbert Halloway. In June 27th of 2017, Deputy Ladwig was on routine patrol. He was stationed at the light rail station on Watt and I-80. Little did he know that day would change his life forever. As he went about his normal duties that day, he encountered the defendant, Nakori Spann. Nakori Spann had been at the light rail for some time, and he did not have a valid ticket. He was loitering and causing problems prior to Deputy Ladwig confronting him. When Deputy Ladwig attempted to write him a citation, Nakori Spann became enraged. He was yelling profanities, and he was angry. He immediately engaged the officer. He attempted to punch Deputy Ladwig, and their verbal interaction became physical quickly. Within seconds, Deputy Ladwig was fighting for his life. Nakori Spann, within 30 seconds of the fight, had grabbed the deputy's weapon. He put it directly to his jaw, and he fired one time, changing Deputy Ladwig's life forever. Fortunately for Deputy Ladwig, when Nakori Spann tried to shoot him a second time, he missed. Deputy Ladwig got up and ran. He ran for cover. And even in that moment, Deputy Ladwig still performed his job. In the moments when Deputy Ladwig did not know whether he would live or die, he warned patrons, told them to run for cover. And while most people did that, as we can all understand, Herbert Halloway did something special. He took a path not traveled by many of us. And I am so proud of his actions that day, as all of you should be. He was already on the light rail, seated, ready to go home to his family, his wife who's here today. He heard the gunshots, and while everyone else ran away or froze in fear, Herbert Halloway jumped off the light rail and ran to Deputy Ladwig. While everyone else ran away, Herbert Halloway ran to save a life of a man he'd never met. He took off his shirt and he put it to the deputy's face and stopped the bleeding. And we are here today. Because of that, Deputy Ladwig is here today, which I know his wife, who's here today, is extremely thankful for that and the actions of Herbert Halloway. And he did this in a moment when Nakori Spann was still on the loose. He had not been apprehended. He was not apprehended for about 3 hours. He got into a standoff with the sheriff's department, who acted honorably that day. They took him into custody without incident after a 3-hour standoff. And it was because of their actions that day as well, and the actions of our victim advocate, Colette Brown, who could not be here today, that during the course of this trial, which we did last July during the pandemic, that the defendant was convicted of all of the charges. And justice was finally served for Deputy Ladwig. The defendant was convicted and sentenced to 32 years to life in state prison. Now I have the honor this morning of seeing the meeting between Herbert Halloway and Deputy Ladwig, because Deputy Ladwig also is a unique and special person. He also, like Herbert Halloway, took a path less traveled by many of us. The first time I met Deputy Ladwig and his wonderful wife, unlike most people, he wasn't angry. He didn't ask how much time the defendant was going to get or what the punishment would be, and he didn't act like a victim. And if he did, we would have all understood it, but he didn't. Again, like Herbert, he took a path less traveled. The only thing he asked me about was if he could meet the citizen that saved his life. That's what he was concerned about. Unfortunately, we were going to start trial, so that couldn't happen. But the two of them got to meet this morning, and I'm so incredibly proud to bring them together. They are both wonderful, unique people. And again, without the actions of Herbert Halloway that day, Deputy Ladwig would not be standing here with his wife. And I know Deputy Ladwig would like to say a couple words too. Deputy Ladwig?
Morning. Herb, it is such an humbling experience to formally meet you. I know a lot of time has passed since we first met, but I can't explain to you how often I think of the human kindness that you displayed that day. I know I have said this before in open court, but I really do want to publicly thank you for your actions. You literally took your shirt off your back for me. Even though I seemed like I was probably pretty stressed in the moment, I was also extremely impressed by you. For one, without hesitation, you immediately recognized the difference between right and wrong. And two, you thought to yourself, I need to do something about this, and how can I help? And you jumped into action. In the literal lowest time of my life, when I was sitting there profusely bleeding from the gunshot wound and had just ran through a sea of onlookers that were more concerned with catching the incident on their phone for WorldStar or something like that, you really restored my faith in humanity through what you did that day. And so that I thank you. I just want to say that I also appreciate you being such an excellent witness in this case. I know that oftentimes cases like these where law enforcement is the victim, it's hard to have good and cooperative witnesses. So I thank you for being so helpful with the district attorney and the prosecution, the successful prosecution of Nikori Span. Again, I just want to say I'm honored to be here and to experience this with you. So, thank you.
Anne Marie, at this time, I'm honored to present Herbert Halloway for this year's Outstanding Citizens Award.
Yes, I'll keep it short. With the help of my beautiful wife and my sister, came up with a little something. First and foremost, glad that we can finally meet. I honorably and humbly accept this award. It's an honor to meet you, and I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you healed well. Like I said, I'm gonna keep it short. I did what I would hope someone would do for my family, myself, or anyone else. I just hope that in the future people will, if nothing else, just take action. Not take videos, not issue. If it's needed, yes, but other than that, just take action. If someone is in need of help, someone is in need of assistance, just help. That's all. Like I said, I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you're healed. I'm glad that this is all over with. Like I said, I humbly accept and I appreciate and I'm honored. I thank you all.
Just don't worry. Yes. You're in the middle, Herbert. Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to take a break, right, Kelly? Yes. All right. Thank you. Congratulations to our recipients.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for the second phase of the morning session. At this time, I'm going to introduce Maria Wilson, Deputy District Attorney, to do the next award recipient. This is the story of a young woman who displayed extraordinary courage under circumstances that thankfully most of us have never had to face. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a hot summer day when Kimberly received several text messages from her brother-in-law, Jonathan, asking if someone was outside her home. Jonathan told her that he was on his way. He was going to come and check because this person was making threats toward the family. At the time, Kimberly was home alone with her 5 young children, the youngest of whom was 2 months old. Her husband, Jonathan's brother, was a long-haul truck driver and was gone at work. Kimberly had no idea what these text messages were about, but she went ahead and looked out her front door and she saw someone. It was the defendant. He was standing outside his parked car, staring directly at her house. She started to get nervous at this point. She had no idea who this person was. She's home alone with her kids, and she just received information that somebody was there maybe to do her harm. Seconds later, Jonathan pulled up and jumped out of his car. He and the defendant had been friendly acquaintances at one point in time, but their relationship had soured to the point where the defendant was now threatening Jonathan's family. The two of them squared off in the middle of the street as though they were getting ready to fight. Ultimately, they both backed off, and it seemed like the confrontation was over. But as Jonathan walked away back toward his car, the defendant pulled out his gun, fired off 14 rounds, shooting Jonathan in the head. From her front door, holding her 2-month-old baby, Kimberly watched the whole thing unfold. The trauma of seeing Jonathan murdered in real time was really just the beginning for Kimberly. She gave statements to the police. She gave a description of the defendant. She described his car. A search of Jonathan's phone and social media led to the defendant. And ultimately, Kimberly was able to identify the defendant as Jonathan's killer. She was the sole witness to this crime. And Kimberly's cooperation was vital to the successful prosecution of this case. We simply couldn't have done it without her. But there were other factors that added layers of stress and of anxiety to Kimberly's life. First, the defendant's family would show up in full force at every single court appearance, at every single court hearing, 15 to 20 of them at every single appearance. It felt intimidating to Kimberly and to her family. And I know there were times that to Kimberly, it felt like this show of force was designed in some way to maybe dissuade her from testifying. It was unnerving. Second, shockingly, a judge drastically reduced the bail amount in this case, and the defendant was able to bail out of custody while awaiting trial. So here we've got the guy who murdered Jonathan out of custody. He knows where Kimberly lives. He knows that she's the only one who can identify him as the killer. Kimberly and her family can't afford to move anyplace else. They're living in the same house. Her husband's still working long-haul trucking, so he's gone a good portion of the time, and Kimberly's still home with her 5 kids, worried like crazy about her ability to keep her kids safe. Worried like crazy that the defendant, who only lives 3 miles away, would show up at any time and could hurt them. Third, Kimberly really had no time to process her own trauma or her own grief. She was focused solely on her family, focused on providing solace to her husband who'd lost his brother, her husband who was suffering tremendous guilt for not being there to protect the family. She was dealing with her husband's sorrow, her husband's anger. She was focused on her oldest daughter, who was waking up night after night after night with nightmares, crying, suffering tremendous anxiety at seeing her favorite uncle gunned down in the middle of the street. To top it all off, this trial took place in the middle of COVID. So not only is Kimberly doing Zoom schooling with 3 of her 5 kids on 1 laptop, I might add, she's having to prepare for trial. And the anxiety and the stress and the strain brought Kimberly to tears a couple of times. But here's the thing. Kimberly never wavered. She never said, "It's too much. I can't do it." She never said, "Isn't there any way you can do this case without me?" She never said, "I'm way too scared to testify. I'm worried that my family is going to be hurt, that I'm going to be hurt. I can't do it." She never did that. Kimberly forged ahead because she knew that we needed her to prove this case, but more importantly, because she knew it was the right thing to do. We followed court COVID protocol, which meant that none of Kimberly's family members could come into the courtroom to offer her support as she testified. And thank goodness we had victim advocate Aminel Dorsey, who worked her magic and was in the courtroom with Kimberly and was here at the office every day setting up a Zoom link for the rest of the family to watch, bringing the family water and snacks and Kleenex. And Aminel, I just want to thank you for being the rock you are for us in the office and for so many victims and families in our community. Thank you. I also want to thank the officers and detectives from the Sacramento Police Department who responded quickly and worked hard to ensure the successful prosecution of this case. In particular, I'd like to thank Detective Scott Kreutz. He was the lead detective on the case, and he was very patient with me as I bugged him incessantly to help me make heads or tails of phone records and social media records. He was very patient with me, and he was very kind and showed compassion to Kimberly and her family. He wanted to be here today, but I believe he's with his mom in Florida. But Kimberly, he did want to be here to acknowledge you today. I also want to thank Officer Brian Aroso, who is here today. He was the first officer to respond on scene. He arrived alone. And here's Jonathan bleeding in the middle of the street. He immediately went to Jonathan's aid while simultaneously trying to secure the scene. His actions and professionalism in the middle of the chaos at the time serves as an example of all the good that our peace officers do day in and day out. So thank you, Brian. In closing, the weight of the world was really on Kimberly's shoulders from the moment that Jonathan was murdered. And honestly, I think it's fair to say that Kimberly is still suffering the fallout. And Kimberly, I'm sorry that we can't do anything to fix things and make everything okay. But what we can do is acknowledge and honor Kimberly's commitment to doing the right thing and say thank you for being such an example of strength, no matter how hard things get, no matter how hard life gets. Anne Marie, I present to you Kimberly for this year's Outstanding Citizens Award.
I just want to thank everybody who's helped us. It's been really tough. I don't think that we could have did what we did without you guys, and I'm very, very happy to have you guys, all of you, whoever that helped us with everything. Even until today, I am still afraid. I just had a dream 2 nights ago about my brother-in-law. And he came and he came to our home and he did what he did the last day I saw him. He came and he had said, I just wanted to come and say hi and make sure you guys are fine. I feel like I could have done something, more things. I could have called the cops and stuff, but I didn't think about that. So, thank you to everybody who helped us.
Thank you. Extraordinary. At this point, I'd like to introduce Terry Ann Grimes to do our next recipient.
Rhiannon is the epitome of resilience. These are words that were shared to me by court staff after seeing Rhiannon for nearly all of 2020 be in their trial court department and hearing her story. Rhiannon is the epitome of resilience. She was 10 years old when her mother married Stan Mundy. And almost immediately, he began sexually assaulting her repeatedly. And for 7 years, she sustained that abuse before she reported it to the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and Detective, now Sergeant Kevin Darling, who's here today, did an incredibly thorough investigation. But the road to justice was so long. But Rhiannon was resilient. In 2012, a case opened in family court, and it took years before it culminated in a trial. And a visiting judge who presided over the family court trial did not sustain the petition. Instead, he found that he could not believe that a young girl would have suffered so long in silence. And so Rhiannon's worst fears came true because her brother and sister were returned to the home of a sexual predator. And it did not take long for that sexual predator to molest her sister. Everything that she had reported to prevent came true. And Detective Pam Linke from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department started an investigation, and our office filed charges in 2017, and yet still the road to justice was long. By the time I met Rhiannon, the pro per defendant had engaged in about 3 years of delay tactics, and she reminded me when we first met that this monster had taken over half of her life. But she was more concerned about her sister than she was for herself. She advocated for her sister. When it came time for them to testify, she created this beautiful basket that was filled with things to relax her the night before she testified, and a little stress animal that she could bring on the stand, magazines to occupy her in the hallways, although she didn't need them because Rhiannon was on the phone with her in the middle of her sister's testimony, encouraging her. You see, Rhiannon never thought about herself amidst all the investigation in the family court trials and the repeated sexual abuse. Rhiannon put herself through school. She got a degree in psychology from San Francisco State. She interned as at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, and it wasn't long before they hired her as a victim advocate. And while she was traveling the long road to justice in her own case, she walked alongside other victims traveling their long road themselves. She advocated for other victims to make sure the fullest extent of the law was charged as felonies and not misdemeanors for the conduct committed against them. And she was their listening ear and their shoulder that they cried on when some of them disclosed to you for the first time their sexual abuse. And so Rhiannon is the epitome of resilience. And even though she was doing so much, she thought, this isn't enough. I need to do more. And so she enrolled in a master's program and is still a full-time student at Pepperdine University, getting her master's degree in psychology. And she testified in March of 2020, 1 week after taking her midterms, and the day before a pandemic was declared in our country. And the jury saw the resilience that Rhiannon had, and they embodied it themselves. And after nearly 4 months of delay from when Rhiannon testified before the jury could come back and even hear the defense's case, but every single one of them came back and swiftly delivered guilty verdicts. They didn't even have to hear your readback. They knew. It stuck with them for 4 months, her resilience. Rhiannon is an outstanding citizen not because she was a victim of horrendous repeated sexual assaults. She is an outstanding citizen because she did not let that define her. She did not let defeat in the family court dissuade her. She did not let 4 years of delayed prosecution derail her. Instead, she thought about others. She could have so easily crawled into a hole, and yet she's dedicating her life to help others crawl out of one. It's for these reasons, Anne Marie, that I submit to you, Rhiannon, for this year's Outstanding Citizen Award.
I've been thinking all week about what I should say here, and I'm still not quite sure, so please bear with me. First, thank you, Terry-Ann, for sharing my story, and also thank you for the opportunity that gave Terry-Ann the ability to share my story. It's something that I've considered doing for a long time. It was eight or 9 years ago, in 2 months, that I first met Detective Darling, and the fact that he is still here today to support me. Haven't really talked to him in that much time either, but that just shows like how amazing he is, and I think that can show you a glimpse into what my experience was like when I first came forward and made a report. And if it wasn't for him, and also Terry-Ann really kicking it into high gear when she took on the case, and for Rafaela's support, I don't think I really would have made it through. So please don't let them give me all of the credit. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here this morning. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back here at 1:30. Anything else, Shelley? All right, thank you, guys. Congratulations, Kimberly and Rhiannon.